this video, I would like to talk about demographic information questions. Demographic information consists of facts about respondents' personal characteristics such as age, gender, race, place of residence, etc. They can be very useful in surveys. They allow you to describe your respondents in terms of their demographic characteristics, and they can also be very useful for finding relationships between demographic characteristics and other survey questions. For example, if you want to know that if attitudes towards something vary across demographic groups, these demographic items can be very, very useful. However, respondents typically don't like answering questions about their personal characteristics. There's many reasons for this. Sometimes questions about your income, your age, your gender, your place of residence can feel very intrusive, and they can also raise fear of a respondent being identified because of the information they provide about themselves. So demographic questions are important, but they are also very sensitive for respondents. So there is a balance in how much demographic information items we can include in a questionnaire without upsetting respondents, but also trying to answer our research question. So the question becomes, when do you include demographic information items in your questionnaire? And when do you include which type of demographics in your questionnaire? And the answer is, it depends on your research question and your research objectives guiding the survey. You should only ask for demographic information when your research question requires you to. If your research question is about finding out whether there are differences across a specific demographic group, then you should ask. Don't ask for demographic information just because. So ask for demographic information very sparingly and only when you need it. So let's talk about some specific types of demographic information items. One of them is age. When you're asking respondents about age, do not ask for a date of birth. A date of birth is something very personal, it's very sensitive information, and rarely would you need a specific date of birth. Don't ask for an exact age. People might find this, might feel uncomfortable when having to provide a date of birth or a specific age. So instead of that, consider using age brackets, right? Or categories that include a number of years in them. However, when designing your brackets, make sure that you're considering the population you are targeting with your survey. For example, distributing a survey for CSU UMB students, and that is your population, perhaps most of the respondents are going to be within the 18 to 25 age bracket. So if your brackets are too wide, all the respondents or most of the respondents will probably just fall into one of them without giving you a lot of information. Again, it depends on your research question. Another important demographic item that respondents are very sensitive about is income. Most people do not want to disclose exactly how much they make because of privacy and anonymity concerns. But also, most people don't know exactly how much their household makes per year. We do taxes once a year, and that's pretty much the only time we really look at how much we have made. But off the top of our heads, it's very hard for somebody to know the exact income they made. And also, people have different ideas about what income means. Does that mean your income without taxes? Does it mean your income after taxes? Is it just your paycheck before all the deductions, after the deductions, etc.? So you have to be very clear about what you're asking for. And when you're asking for an amount, as in the case of age, consider using income brackets. And remember to consider the population you are dealing with to construct useful categories. Also, when asking about income, be very careful about what income you're asking for. Is it your yearly income, the income the respondent made within a year? Is it a weekly income? Is it a monthly income, etc.? And it will depend on several circumstances. How respondents interpret this or are able to answer this. If they get paid weekly, then it will be simpler. If they get paid monthly, then it will probably be easier to ask for monthly income. If you ask for yearly income, then they will have to make that calculation, and it might be hard for them. One tip here: do not ask for average income. Average of what? Asking for average amounts is very, very tricky, and respondents usually have a hard time coming up with an answer. It is better to ask about an estimate of the total income the respondent made within a reasonable time frame, and provide response categories or brackets that are reasonable. Another typical demographic information item is the question about race and ethnicity. Ethnicity is about learned cultural behaviors that are celebrated throughout regions around the world, right? It's a learned cultural behavior. For example, Hispanic origin is about ethnicity. Race, on the other hand, is an indication of biological heritage, right? With which you were born, regardless of where you were born, or regardless of your learned behavior. Race is more a biological heritage. Ethnicity is more about learned cultural behaviors. Right? So that is the difference between them. They are not the same. However, most surveys combine the two. They combine race and ethnicity, they put a slash between them, but that poses a big problem. Consider this example. Please state your race/ethnicity, and the categories typically include Hispanic or Latino, white, black, Asian, other. Now, while this is a very, very common item we find in many, many surveys, some respondents may have a hard time responding to this question. Consider a black Hispanic. What would they choose? Would they choose Hispanic or Latino because that's their ethnicity, or would they choose black because that's their race? So while many people may find a category that they can fall into, some respondents may have a very hard time choosing one category because the item is not really mutually exclusive. It's combining two questions, and the categories are not mutually exclusive. Now, let's suppose you don't ask about ethnicity and you just ask about race, like in this example. Please state your race: white, black, Asian, other. Now, because many Latino or Hispanic respondents are used to an example like the previous one, they would have a very hard time answering this question, right? They will look for Latino or Hispanic because that's how they identify themselves. They won't find it, and they will most likely choose other. I've worked with many with many surveys, and in surveys that did not ask uh, about ethnicity, they only asked about race. Hispanic respondents typically chose other, even when Hispanic or not Hispanic is not really a race. Right? So, what are you to do? Well, the census, the Office of Budget and Management, they suggest that you should have the two separate. You should have a question about ethnicity that at the minimum includes Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. And then you should have a race question that includes American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, white. And in some cases, add another category that includes mixed race. Because this construct is complex. What you identify, the race you identify with, may be a mix. Maybe your parents are of different races. So, what are you to choose? Do you choose both or do you choose one? And so, in some cases, it's very useful to put a mixed or other category in the race question, but separate ethnicity from race and ask for ethnicity first, so that Latino respondents, especially when you're using surveys in California that has such a high percentage of Hispanic population, you should ask for the ethnicity first and then ask for race. Now, we could discuss about all types of items, but there's not a lot of time for that. But you should know that items that ask about education, marital status, family structures, they are very, very hard to write. Those items are usually subject to problems with their categories not being either clear or mutually exclusive or collectively exhaustive. So you have to be very, very careful with them. And you should think very hard about what your research question is and what you're really trying to answer with these particular demographic items. They are very hard to write. For example, I took this item from SurveyMonkey templates. SurveyMonkey is a very large surveying tool. They provide some templates, and I just brought this one, and it's about marital status. And the question goes: are you now married, widowed, divorced, separated, or never married? And so, as you see the responses, or the response categories, you will quickly realize that some of the respondents may not find them mutually exclusive. You can be still legally married, but separated from your husband or wife. You can be a widow and be married, or you can be a widow and separated, and so forth. So some respondents are going to have a very tough time answering what now means and what the status really is. This item is flawed, and you don't know exactly what you're going to get from it. The same happens with education. It seems simple, but sometimes they can be very hard to interpret. I also took this item from the SurveyMonkey templates. Let's read it. What is the highest level of school you have completed, or the highest degree you have received? So they're asking for the school completed or highest degree you have received. Let's look at the categories. Less than high school degree, some college but no degree, associate degree, bachelor degree, graduate degree. Okay, so let's look at the first category, less than high school degree. That one is a category that doesn't show anything completed or a degree. But the question is asking for completed school or degree. So if somebody has not completed high school, what are they going to choose? Also, the some college but no degree. That's no completion and no degree. So what does that category mean even? If I had done some college but no degree, I have not completed college and I don't have the degree. So the highest degree I have completed is the high school degree. So that category of some college but no degree is a wasted category, and the whole item is very, very confusing. So this is just an example of how complicated demographic items can be to write. And it's a warning that you should not have demographic items if you don't really need them, because they are very, very complicated. Respondents hate them, and that's why you should only ask them when you need them, and think very hard about what exactly you need to know before you construct the item. Other general considerations about demographic information items are you should group them when you are putting them in your survey and you have many questions. You should group the demographic items. You should explain the respondents why you are asking them about their demographics, and reminding them that you will keep their the information anonymous and confidential. And another tip is that you should include them at the end of the questionnaire to gain the respondents' trust first. If your first question is how much money do you make, you're going to put off a lot of respondents. So it's better to include the demographic information items at the end. That's all I have on this topic. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.